Sam Panopoulos left his Greek home with his two brothers in 1956 at the age of 20, bound for a new life in North America. However, on the boat ride over, they made a pit stop, one that would forever change Panopoulos' life and pizza history. Getting off the boat in Naples, Italy, Panopoulos was overwhelmed by the sights, sounds, and smells of a city known for its food. But this wasn't the case yet with its pizza. Panopoulos' first ever bite of pizza was something of a spaghetti-like concoction that left him disappointed in the food item. Truth be told, pizza at this point had never really been considered a delicacy in the Naples food scene. It's often claimed to have been invented in the 18th century, though this is a matter of debate as it all depends on your definition of what pizza is. If you choose to loosely define pizza as flatbread with topping thrown on it, there is evidence that the Persian army around the 5th and 6th centuries BC used their shields to cook flatbread in this way out in the field. The soldiers would then cover the bread with things like cheese and dates for a quick meal. Further, it's very likely that people have been putting various toppings like cheese on bread as long as there has been cheese and bread. This all brings us back to Naples. Not long after the tomato was introduced to Europe in the 16th century, the poor folks of Naples added them, often in overripe form, to their pizza-like food item and gave the world the first basic tomato sauce pizza, considered by many to be the birth of modern pizza, known as the Napoletana pizza, defined as flatbread topped by tomato sauce and cheese. Often bought from street vendors, Professor of History at the University of Denver, Dr. Carol Helstofsky, in her book Pizza, A Global History, notes pizza at this time was considered a weekday food because it was cheap and helped people save money for their Sunday macaroni. To quote, "It was a cuisine of scarcity. Whatever you had, you tossed it on. Garlic, anchovies, other little fish bits." In the 1830s, American Samuel Morse of Morse code fame visited Naples and looked upon the pizza being sold on the streets with disgust. A species of the most nauseating cake, like a piece of bread that had been taken reeking of the sewer. This sentiment about pizza seemed to be the norm for quite some time among the affluent. As to how it spread to be a popular dish among those who weren't poor, a very popular myth, of which there are a few variations, is that in 1889, King Umberto and his cousin Margherita, and also his queen, were traveling the country in hopes of calming the advancing tide of revolution in newly reunited Italy. They arrived in Naples after many long nights on the road, eating the same fancy food, much of it French-inspired. Tired of overly rich dinners, the queen demanded something simpler, a commoner meal. So she was delivered 3 pizzas by then-famed pizza maker Raffaele Esposito, one of which was supposedly a new concoction of mozzarella, tomato sauce, and basil pizza. The queen loved it so much that she popularized it among the elite, with the chef himself naming that particular pizza after her, hence Pizza Margherita, and Esposito often being dubbed the father of modern pizza. Or so the story goes. The truth is that pizza made in this exact way was already present going back almost a century before this supposed event. On top of that, in 1849, such a dish is noted by Emanuel Rocco, with it stated that the mozzarella should be arrayed out in a flower shape over the sauce, which gives an alternate potential origin to the name of this particular pizza, with Margherita meaning daisy. That said, it's always possible the queen really did order such a dish from Esposito. As evidence to support this event having actually occurred, a thank you letter from the queen herself with the official royal seal is still on display to this day at Pizzeria Brandy, once owned by the descendants of Esposito. Esposito is also known to have received permission to display the royal seal in his shop. Unfortunately, upon closer scrutiny, Raffaele Esposito received the aforementioned permission in 1871 for a shop that sold wine rather than a pizzeria. Then there's the problems with the letter he supposedly received from the Queen in 1889. Beyond no record of such a letter being sent in the palace archives, which do still have records for many other mundane correspondence that occurred that day, including even noting the paying of a washerwoman on the day in question, the royal seal on the letter is only similar to the real deal and very clearly was stamped on, not printed as was the case for actual royal correspondence of the time. Further, rather than official stationery normally used by the Queen, this letter had handwritten House of Her Royal Majesty on the top. Comparisons between actual letters from the Queen and this one also show a difference in handwriting, general format, and signature. The smoking gun, however, is the fact that the person who wrote the letter started it off by writing, "Dear Mr. Raffaele Esposito Brandy." The problem is Raffaele Esposito never went by his wife's maiden name. Who did was Esposito's brother-in-law's sons, who took over Esposito's restaurant in 1932 and renamed it from Pizzeria of the Queen of Italy, the name Esposito gave it over a decade before the supposed Queen event, to Pizzeria Brandy. After they took over the establishment, according to historian Dr. Antonio Mattossi, they attempted in a variety of ways to connect the restaurant's history with eminent guests. Had they gone with Esposito's actual name, the connection between themselves, their restaurant, and their famed pizza-making uncle wouldn't have been clear to patrons. In any event, putting aside the cute little queen popularization myth, in truth, it would seem the popularity of various pizzas simply slowly spread from a dish of the poor to something most enjoy, all without any royal approval. Pertinent to the story at hand, pizza made its way to North America around the dawn of the 20th century, though only in a limited fashion. It wouldn't be until the 1950s that pizza would start to become widely noticed outside of the Italian-American community, thanks in part to certain Italian-American celebrities publicly enjoying the dish, and very notably Harry Warren and Jack Brooks' 1952 song sung by Dean Martin on the soundtrack for the 1953 film The Caddy, That's Amore, which contained the famous line, "When the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore." This all brings us back to Panopolis. With his brothers, he arrived in the Ontario town of Chatham, about an hour's drive from the US and Michigan border, in 1956, where they opened a diner together called the Satellite. It's actually still there, but under different management today. What they served there was, well, rather eclectic. In an effort to distinguish their restaurant from others, Panopolis & Co. began offering Chinese food, also relatively foreign to North American palates at the time, along with things like burger, Spanish rice with fried eggs, traditional Greek delicacies with bacon strips, and then came pizza. As we just alluded to, the man himself explained in an interview with Atlas Obscura in 2015, pizza was a relatively unknown food in much of North America at the time, and particularly Canada. According to Panopolis, the only places nearby people could get pizza was in Windsor or Detroit, both about 50 miles away from his restaurant. Panopolis goes on, the pizza in Canada in those days was primitive, you know? Dough, sauce, cheese, and mushroom, bacon, or pepperoni. That was it. You had no choices. You could get one of the three toppings or more of them together. Again, attempting to distinguish his fare, he served customers pizza with things like Vienna sausage, rice, olives, and anchovies, just like in Naples. But it wouldn't be until 1962 when he first put pineapple and ham on a pizza and called it Hawaiian, with Panopolis claiming he named it after the brand of canned pineapple he had taken off the shelf. As to his inspiration here, Panopolis noted, those days nobody was mixing sweets and sours and all that. The only sweet and sour thing you would get is Chinese pork. You know, with the sweet and sour sauce. Otherwise, there was no mix. As they were already serving Chinese food with good results, he thought they should attempt to find other sweet and sour mixes. With regards to such an experiment with pizza, he stated, "We just put it on just for the fun of it, see how it was going to taste. We were young in the business and we were doing a lot of experiments." It also helped, and perhaps partially inspired him, that it was in the 1950s and 1960s when not only pizza was beginning to come into its own in North America, but a very Americanized version of tiki culture was also sweeping through the region. It popularly started with millions of young men returning home from the Pacific Theater after experiencing South Pacific culture for the first time. Soon, barrels of rum, girls in hula skirts, and tiki torches were a popular entertaining form of escapism and relaxation. Of course, the North American version of tiki culture then and now bears little resemblance to the real thing, and the actual origins are very religious in nature. This has led some who feel the whole thing is more than a little culturally offensive to compare it to, say, having fruity alcoholic beverages complete with umbrellas and cross straws, all served in drinking glasses made in the shape of Jesus and Muhammad's heads. Perhaps throwing in some Buddha statues and calling the whole thing Jewish culture just to make it more analogous to the mishmash that is the tiki bars. Regardless of anyone's feelings on that can of worms, important to the story at hand is that the 1950s particularly saw things like pineapples becoming very popular in North American homes. Stores began advertising pineapples as a way to add a tropical dash to everyday life. So it's perhaps no surprise that Panopolis' Hawaiian Pizza, debuting at the same time, saw his customers quite literally eating it up. Though Panopolis noted nobody liked it at first, but after that, they went crazy about it. Panopolis would ultimately sell his restaurant in 1972, and in interviews shortly before his death, lamented he hadn't attempted to patent Hawaiian pizza. And yes, in certain circumstances, a food item can be patented. As to why he didn't try, he stated, "Those days when I first came up with it, there was nothing to it. You know what I mean? It was just another piece of bread cooking in the oven." At the time, Panopoulos had no way of knowing his little experiment would become an oft-lamented pizzeria staple the world over.